your podcast app. You'll see there's a discourse segment. Is this book a masterpiece or problematic? One's a lifelong diehard fan, the other's a first-time reader. Both are really smart and funny and attractive. Sweet feather, talking twins and hierarchy. Sweet feather, relentless focus on their bodies. Sweet feather, what do they mean by all American? Sweet feather, no sex, just titillation.
Hello, Dr. Pardo.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I can't hear you. Wait, what's happening? You are as a silence. Can you hear me? Oh no. Oh no. This is my nightmare. We're living my nightmare. Can't hear Pardo. Can she hear me? Living a nightmare. And I'm getting scared. I can't hear Pardo. Can she hear me? I guess it's Halloween time. I guess it's that in-between time. So being terrified might make sense. Can you hear me? Why can't I hear you? Welcome. That was
Hi.
scary. Hi, hello. Let's kind of draw some resources together.
And I did just get a bunch of Halloween candy to give out to children, so I have easy access to it.
What kind of candy are we talking?
I got like a bunch of different chocolate, like just the usuals, the old standards. I mean, what else are we doing here? I got 4 of these little dudes.
Oh, I love. Now, listeners, I assume this is getting cut anyways, but Pardo is currently eating Smarties, but not American Smarties, not that tube of gross pastel-colored, chewy, chalky candies. She's eating Canadian or European Smarties. They're almost like an M&M, but much better.
Yeah, and in Canada, the thing that you call Smarties, of course, is what we call Rockets. They're gross.
Whoa.
No one likes them. No one wants them. Well,
I didn't know you called them Rockets.
Well, what do you think we're going to call them? We obviously can't call them Smarties.
In America, both are called Smarties. But I guess you could get the European Smarties.
Smarties.
Yeah, that's true.
No, and thank you for acknowledging it's better than M&M. I think the difference is the candy shell is, I think, a bit thinner, and the chocolate is probably better, and there's no nut in it. Which, by the way, I didn't used to like Smarties, but now I like them because I have a new way of eating them. The Smarties serves my job to be done of just lasting longer and giving something to do with my hands. Of like, I take one, I put it in my mouth for the length of at least an immunity challenge.
You think? Are you sucking? You must be sucking. You're not chewing?
I'm sucking. Yeah. I got sensible teeth.
Sensitive to the point where you can't bite through a Smartie?
I can bite, but I like to soften it because I don't love a hard candy. I don't love a hard crunch of waiting.
Okay.
That's why I don't like M&Ms. I'm not trying to crunch on chocolate. It's just not I'm not trying to have that experience I like more to suck it until it becomes, instead of being a hard candy shell, it becomes almost a mucus membrane that I can just sort of.
Yeah, if we weren't going to cut this before, which we were either way, the mucus membrane really sends me. That has to go.
I'm not cutting it. I'm not cutting this. All right, we're talking about this book. Give me your 6-word review.
Obvious fake boyfriend, but it's fine.
Mm-hmm. Okay, mine is fake boyfriend revealed. Wakefields, maybe San Francisco, and I made San Francisco one word.
Of course, San Francisco canonically is only one word. That makes perfect sense to me. You could have said Frisco, which is what we all call it.
All right, should we go to the cliff? Do you have it handy? I don't. The cliff was basically Caroline Pearce, notorious wrong kind of gossip, who loves to just tell a tale.
Let me just find the actual one, though.
All right. Well, in the meantime, I'll summarize it. So Caroline's been talking all about this boyfriend, Adam, and she's getting all these love letters from him, and he apparently lives 2 hours away in Cold Springs, and she's going on and on about it to Lila and Jessica, who smell bullshit, and what's going to happen is the cliffhanger.
So when do we get to meet this guy? Lila demanded. He can't stay up in Cold Springs forever. Yeah, Caroline, invite him down, Carl urged, laughing. He can help me with my English paper next week. As a matter of fact, he is coming down. When? I'm not sure. Maybe next weekend? He's going to see if he can get the car. Maybe his soul can just sort of float over from Cold Springs, Kara said, giggling. She and Lila opened the door of the lounge and walked back onto the dance floor, and Caroline walked slowly over to the mirror. She sighed, remembering the sound of Lila and Kara's laughter. Elizabeth had just come into the ladies' lounge, and she stopped short when she saw the strange expression on Caroline's face. Caroline, are you okay? She asked. I'm fine, Elizabeth. But actually, she didn't feel fine at all. This is going to be a long evening, she thought to herself. And something tells me that the week ahead won't be easy either. What is Caroline afraid of? Find out in Sweet Valley High 17, Love Letters.
Can you remind me?
Of course.
In the previous book, we don't know yet for sure. It's not confirmed that he's fake, right?
It is not confirmed that he is fake, although
But it's
it is
very
obvious. I mean, we've already gotten planted that Elizabeth loves Elizabeth Barrett Browning, and we've gotten the letter that she reads from quote unquote Adam that is very clearly from Elizabeth Barrett Browning's poetry.
And we also have, kind of interestingly, like Jessica and Lila expressing suspicion, I think, pretty early on. So it's also internally kind of being questioned, and which I think actually, and we'll get into it, but it's one of the interesting things about this actual book, Love Letters, is that like Jessica and Lila pretty much have a steady suspicion. Not exactly like there is some arc to it, but like pretty much from the second she starts talking about him. So there's not that much of a build in that sense, which is kind of interesting. But
to me, it is very, very similar to Too Good to Be True, insofar as the like primary plot is revealed immediately. Like there's never any question. In the same way, there's no question whether Susie is good or evil. There's no question whether Adam is real or not. And so there's actually all sorts of other really interesting, fun stuff that can happen because we're not like, it would be such a boring book if it were really invested in whether Adam is real or not.
Well, if it was a book about is Adam real or not, it wouldn't be a book from Caroline's perspective. And this is a book from Caroline's perspective. So I think then the sort of suspense of it comes, it's not from is he real or not, but it's like, can she keep this up or anything? I guess it makes sense to do plot summary first.
I think that's why we do have started doing plot summary first.
Okay, yeah. You start.
Caroline Pearce, wrong kind of gossip, has a fake boyfriend, Adam, that everyone is kind of suspicious about, but she is laying it on thick and keeps getting these fake letters that are written really, really strangely and clearly from a different era.
She keeps it up for a while. I don't know, some hijinks happens. She like, some stuff happens. We'll talk about it, but like basically ends up fine. But then the other thing that's going on, which is the even funner B plot, which is that the Wakefields are like maybe going to move to San Francisco, and Jessica and Elizabeth get to team up together and do scheming to convince mom and dad that they should stay. And it's super, super fun.
And then just to kind of give the A plot, which Pardo just decided she didn't feel the need to, Jessica and Lila want to embarrass Caroline publicly about her fake boyfriend. And so they create several situations, including a party that they throw in Adam's honor. And Adam obviously can't show up. And Caroline is all ready to confess that it's all been a ruse. But then Todd has actually gotten a fake, very sexy, but not like the sexiest, Adam to stand in. So she doesn't get exposed, and then she chooses to actually reveal the secret herself.
Yeah. Okay, so the title's Love Letters.
The title's Love Letters. Taglines are like, will Caroline's secret be found out? And is Caroline's boyfriend too good to be true? How'd I do?
Very close.
Oh, thank you.
Is Caroline's romance for real?
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
And make-believe romance, ...
Yeah, that's fine. Hit me. I've been waiting. I've been waiting for a cover like this to come into my life. Okay, so we have Caroline Pearce in the front, and she's, for me, giving, is it Blair from The Facts of Life? She's a redheaded Blair from The Facts of Life. Lisa Whelchel.
I don't know.
I don't think this counts as a spoiler, like 15 years ago was on Survivor. So she's a redheaded girl. She's very, very, very cute. I think she's actually exceptionally cute. She is clutching, and I'm sure we're going to get into this, a letter so tightly in her hands that it is like wrinkled, as Jessica, arms folded, stands over the back of her shoulder and kind of is giving her side eye with kind of a scowl. And Caroline's face is like, we would describe it as a smile that doesn't reach her eyes.
First of all, her eyes, I don't have anything to make of this analytically, but it just needs to be said that her eyes are very close together.
Are they?
They're very close together, and also her haircut is wild. And I don't know if you caught
She's
this.
bangs.
No, Robert, it's more than bangs. What we have is
More than bangs.
much more than bangs. What we have is like it's actually wild. Like, and I think it's not exactly a mullet, but it's to where the picture bangs it, but they go around the whole head. It's feathered
Wait,
out.
what?
It's feathered out the whole. It's feathered out on the sides. Do you see? So it's almost like her bangs are all like a bold cut of bangs.
Okay.
You
It's
see
like
this?
a curtain bang and a traditional bang together, kind of.
Like, do you see what I'm talking about? But they're like feathered.
Like to the left, where there's like a chunk of hair where where it should be sleek, but it isn't sleek. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, it's more than isn't sleek. Sleek. I mean, it's almost kind of a mullet. This is like an active look. Like I think this was like an 80s like feathered sort of adopted mullet look. Like that's wild. We haven't seen a haircut like this. Okay, and then the other thing I need to point your attention to,
of course,
is that you said Jessica was standing beside her, and I understand why you say this because
it's not Jessica. She's not pretty. Who is it?
It's Elizabeth.
Oh, it doesn't look like either of them really to me.
No,
How do you know it's Elizabeth?
It's Elizabeth.
Can you see a mole?
No, I know it's Elizabeth because of the hairdo and the shirt.
Yeah, I mean, she's not dressed like a Jessica.
But specifically, it's the hairdo that is the telltale. But it's understandable why you assumed it was Jessica, because it should be Jessica. Because one of the, I think, interesting things for us to discuss about the cover is why is it not Jessica? But I can tell you with certainty it's Elizabeth.
It's definitely Elizabeth.
If it isn't, then James Matthews had a stroke when he was painting this, because like this is Elizabeth. Okay.
Can you also, do you feel like the centering is off within the circle? Like it feels like there should be a third body next to Elizabeth, right?
Oh, wait till we get to the next book cover. There's problems, but
it's really making me very disoriented. I can't look at it any longer. Please feel free to continue to analyze, but I can't keep looking.
I don't know. It is like a recurring thing on these covers that we see like one of the twins standing slightly behind someone, looking at them, as you would say, askance.
I mean, she looks askance. So the things that confuse me are as follows. It's just, it doesn't seem like it's Elizabeth's, like the face that the person is making feels angrier and more judgmental and more skeptical than I'm used to seeing Elizabeth. Am I wrong? Listeners, part of it is shaking her head dismissively.
We've seen her with a look of consternation before. Remember when she was looking at Suzanne? That was major consternation, much more than this.
Yeah, I see your point. I don't know.
But let us then ask, why is Elizabeth on the cover, right? Because for the bulk of the book, Elizabeth is not concerned with Caroline until she learns about this Browning business and it gets to interfere with her play, and we can explain that.
Oh, gosh.
But Jessica is the one who is kind of actively going after Caroline for the bulk of this book, so it should be Jessica standing here with the askance look. And I think we might ask, is there some unarticulated hostility going in the direction from Elizabeth to Caroline? For example, we know that Caroline is a foil for Elizabeth.
Of course.
Caroline is, as you said in the plot summary, she's quote unquote the wrong kind of gossip, in the sense that Elizabeth canonically writes a gossip column, but she's a good person, does it in a nice way, whereas Caroline is always depicted and interpreted by everyone around her to be this very malicious, gross person who is a gossip, and that's bad. And part of the trajectory of this is that Caroline changes and like stops gossiping, learns lesson. So there could be a dear sister element of like, well, she's not the bad gossip anymore. Do I need a bad gossip foil? But then the other element is she can interfere with my play, because Elizabeth has this playwright thing, whatever. So that's the only reading I have of why it could be Elizabeth, because why the fuck else is it not Jessica that we're looking at here?
It makes no sense to me.
Jessica didn't wake up one morning and style her hair this way. It never has happened in the history of this series, except if she was pretending to be Liz. I'm sorry, she has never done that, ever.
I think that makes sense.
Plus the Oxford shirt, hell no.
So the thing that is interesting to me is the way that Caroline is gripping the hell out of the letter, like as if it is like her lifeline and she's worried someone is going to take it from her, which makes sense because throughout the text, Adam and her fake boyfriend she feels what is connecting her to the other people in Sweet Valley and is making people like her.
Title tagline?
Please. I'm empty of thoughts. So anything you've got, I will take.
Okay, I have a couple. Both of the taglines, is Caroline's romance for real and make-believe romance, have to do with this question of real and fake.
Okay.
We have talked before, in Heartbreaker, for example, about this question of what makes a love or a romance real or authentic and what makes it fake. And the kids have a lot of discussions of this type of stuff. And the word love letters and the thing we call love letters is understood to be a form where people are doing those intimate self-expression of sharing their most innermost love with their person, right? And this is this so deep, authentic thing.
Sure.
But love letters are a genre that is normative and that is patterned around literary and aesthetic conventions. And so this question of what is real and what is fake in terms of love, in terms of romance, in terms of relationships, it's not such a clear answer. And I think one of the things that's kind of interesting about the whole story of Adam is, so listeners, what she's essentially doing is plagiarizing these love letters from Robert to Elizabeth Barrett Browning, and she's adapting them with some contemporary relevant details to make it sound like this is from her boyfriend Adam, okay? And part of the way this gets found out is that for this playwriting competition that Elizabeth entered, she's writing a play about Elizabeth Barrett Browning that incorporates these letters and I think some back and forth reading between them of their love letters to each other. And so initially, like when it's revealed that this content has obviously been taken from these poems, that still leaves the possibility open that Adam exists and he plagiarized the poem, which is like a possibility that gets sort of considered in the book before it's ultimately revealed that no, he doesn't exist, period. Okay, well, if Adam were real and he plagiarized these letters, where does that put us on the spectrum of real and fake? Like, I think it sort of raises the question of it isn't black and white. I'm not kidding. I'm serious, because think about it. Like, is it a romantic act to have the intention to send a romantic message and use someone else's words to do it? It's like you're sharing a poem with someone. Like, yes, you've been duplicitous about the authorship of it, but could that still be considered a genuine, authentic act? And I think when they're talking about it in the book, you know, when they're still in this middle ground interpretation of he plagiarized it, and I think it's like she confesses to them, oh, he faked it. He took these poems. Lila, I think teasingly, because she still thinks it's fake, he's fake, says like, oh, well, he obviously really cares about you. Even if he did that, that shows he really cares. And I think there's something true about that. And so what I'm trying to get at is love letters holds that tension of like authenticity and artifice and like what are the boundaries and like what combination is right when it comes to love. And I think the question is, Caroline's romance for real? I don't know that the answer is no. Depending, okay, is it any more fake than what Jessica had with Dennis? Is it any more fake than what Lila had with this one, that one? Yes, those people were real, but they were not real relationships. And also, it doesn't say is the relationship real, it says is the romance real. And romance is an atmosphere. Romance is, I Googled it, a quality or feeling of mystery, excitement, and remoteness from everyday life. And this fake relationship she had with Adam provided that for her temporarily. It didn't work out. It's not a smart, good thing to do, but it created a feeling for her that was real.
I'm halfway like, oh, this is really brilliant, and halfway like, this makes no sense. I don't buy it. So I don't have tons to.
Wait, what don't you buy? I'm not trying to say this is a brilliant thing. I'm saying this is there. Like, what's not to buy?
Just say when you're like, oh, is it really like, is it any less real than Lila and this guy or Jessica and that guy? And the answer is yes, it is less real.
In some ways, like he does not exist. That's obvious, okay? But the question, but like, I'm sorry, like, yeah, I'm not debating, does Adam like whatever, like the realness of Adam, like he is not there. But like, think about it. People have relationships with fucking sex dolls. People marry the Eiffel Tower. People.
True.
There's women out there that have doll babies that they carry around to pretend they're real babies, okay? All I'm saying is it's a spectrum, and I think that the whole like gray area of what if he would be real but he would have plagiarized sort of points us to that. It raises the question of like, well, wait a minute, is it black and white? Is it any better if Adam did exist but he plagiarized it? If Adam was real, and if the love letters was something that he authored himself, well, then is it 100% real? Because what people will put in a letter that's still in this very aestheticized and very normative genre of love letter is obviously also performative. And you know what I'm saying? Like, that's not that's not how you define authenticity, is like, did I plagiarize this or not? Like, I don't know. I'm just saying, like, the questions like to be asked.
The question, you do raise the question. It's reminding me of, and your culture is not my costume, but it's reminding me of Sex and the City. And doesn't Big give Carrie like a book of love letters or something, and then they call each other their immortal beloveds or some shit?
I'm actually dying that you referenced that. Can I tell you why? You're absolutely right. In the movie, he gave her a book called like Love Letters from Great Men or something. From Great
Yes.
Men. And what's funny is that book didn't exist, but there was so much demand for it after the movie that they actually made that book. They actually printed that book. But I was going to mention that, but I didn't because I have another Sex and the City reference for a different thing.
It is interesting that like, so Big giving a book of love letters is also essentially plagiarism. Like, it's like,
That's my point.
I know, I'm agreeing with you.
Well, you said it was basically horse shit.
I never, ever. Horse shit is a valuable fertilizer and we need it for the ecosystem. I would never demean horse shit by comparing it to camera off. Part of his listeners, part of his turned her camera off. She's angry
I'm
with me.
still here. I'm here.
You're just taking a moment to yourself.
I'm here. I'm showing up authentically, and that's what this is right now. All right.
Can we please get into the book?
Fine.
So I'm sorry.
I have something from linguistics, but I guess we don't have time for it.
I need your historian's eye, but you've read too many books, so I don't know if your historian's eye is accurate. To my
I know the answer to the question you're about to ask.
My historian's memory is that this is the first time we have started a book.
Correct.
With the letter C. No, I'm kidding. It starts from Caroline Pearce's perspective. She is sitting up in bed and rubbing her eyes sleepily.
Mm-hmm.
That was jarring and destabilizing to me in a way that I didn't find unpleasant, but I was like, oh, we're starting with Caroline. How interesting.
Remember when in Power Play, in various books, we said, well, we have books ostensibly about secondary and tertiary characters. Let us consider how much of their interior perspective and life we're actually getting. I believe this is the first book that not only starts with the perspective of not Liz or Jess, let alone Wakefields, but also in another person's home for sure.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think this is already starting us off with, this really is a book about Caroline, I feel.
Yeah. And I would like to say, we didn't really get into like how we felt about the book. I love the backstory that we get about Caroline, the way that we understand Caroline better. I think they do a really deft and beautiful job. It's wild because you know Francine sparkles when she writes about sport, but I feel like she really captures, even without the world of sport, kind of Caroline's motivations, why she behaves the way she does, etc.
Yeah, I really am impressed. And I loved the Caroline story. Like, I thought it was such a fantastic job of creating the empathy for her. Like, I felt so much empathy for her and I cared for her so much. Francine and Kate are so skilled at showing vulnerability and nuance behind certain types of personalities, sometimes to a fault, like with Bruce, where sometimes some of us need actually a little more accountability. Yeah. But I thought in this one, it was a really kind of gorgeous balance of showing the motivations and helping us understand why she behaves the way she does, and also having some accountability modeled.
Oh, definitely.
So really nice. I loved it.
So we open with Caroline in bed. She rubs her eyes sleepily. She is awakening to a new day. She's awakening to what she believes is her new role as person with boyfriend, which she feels is the most important role she can have. And it makes her part of a group. It's the first time people were friendly to her last night at the party. The first time anyone had noticed her at all. And she recognizes she's never going to be as popular as the Wakefield twins or Lila. But she's not going to be an outcast anymore. All that has changed now with Adam. Thanks to Adam, people are actually beginning to pay some attention to me. It starts us off immediately with this idea that she feels unacknowledged, unseen, unaccounted for. And so her invented boyfriend, which we find out immediately, she immediately says, all it seemed to take to get in with the right people was a boyfriend, and an invented boyfriend seemed to work as well as the real thing. So we know immediately that it's an invented boyfriend, and we understand kind of her motivation. And this is, for me, the first moment where it's like, well, it's not malicious. It's not trying to do anything bad. It's like, this makes her feel good. And so she's doing it because it makes her feel good.
She tells her sister, I only try to get in on what's going on because I feel left out. And her sister says, but don't you understand that telling stories about people is the surest way to stay left out? So we get introduced to her sister, Anita.
Anita's a hottie.
She's a hottie. She's at college, living at home. We understand that they already have a fraught relationship for the past couple of years at least. And we understand that Caroline basically feels inferior to her. Everything's so easy for Anita. And then we get little kind of undermining comments from Anita about weight and watching your weight and what she eats.
We do see examples of Anita actually being shitty, which is like the weight stuff. And then we also see Anita does ask Caroline, like, oh, did you have fun at the party last night? Did you dance with anyone? Caroline says no. And Anita just lightly says, oh, well, there'll be other dances. And Caroline thinks furiously, I hate it when she's so condescending.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, I don't know that she is being condescending. And it seems like a lot of this is the way that Caroline kind of sees the world shaping how she interprets everything.
Yeah, but like what's I feel like is realistic about it is that sometimes she is being condescending. Like it's not totally not there. Like the fact that we do see both. Yeah. We get kind of reiteration of the fact that everyone in Sweet Valley seems to believe that kind of proximity to the Wakefields is social currency. One of the things that gets Anita's attention and makes her eyebrows shoot up is when Caroline tells her she doesn't need a ride. She's getting one with the Wakefields, which is sort of a lie, or not a lie.
Not sort of a lie. It's a lie.
Like, it's a lie in the sense that that hasn't been agreed to yet by the Wakefields. The Wakefields don't necessarily know, but it's not a lie in the sense that she's going to try to make it actually be what happens. And so then it won't have been a lie. She will have gotten a ride with the Wakefields.
Yeah, that's some real mental gymnastics. She then just goes to the Wakefields' house and asks for a ride, which is not really the same thing.
Yeah, and Jessica's like, Liz, cover for me. Tell her I'm sleeping. And then she's doing some chit chat with Caroline. And we get, I think, one of the many nice examples of Caroline kind of trying and failing. And like her attempts just aren't landing of endearing people to her.
Yeah.
So like she says, Liz, why don't you come to the beach? And Liz says, I'm going to be working. And Caroline's like, it's too nice to work. And you always get straight A's. And Elizabeth's like, well, I'm working on this playwright contest. And Caroline goes, I'm sure you'll win no matter what. I bet no one else will even enter. Elizabeth glanced quizzically at her. And then Liz like finally convinces her to leave and is like, she's like, oh, Jessica's sleeping. Let me hang out and wait for her. And Liz is like, no, she'll sleep late. Why don't you go ahead to the beach and Jessica will be along eventually. And as she's leaving.
This is wild. Listeners, prepare yourselves. You're thinking like, oh, this is going to be another boring thing that Pardo says. This is wild.
Hey, Rude. The Wakefields trash can has been knocked over. And Caroline, so far, so good, is going to fit the lid back into place. The totally lid of the normal trash can. So far, a normal thing to do.
Totally normal.
She did so. A sheet of paper caught her eye. It was a dark photocopy of a letter addressed to a company in San Francisco, and it was signed by Alice Wakefield. Caroline hesitated to read the letter, but curiosity had always been one of her strongest traits. She read the photocopy quickly as she walked to the bus stop, becoming more and more amazed with each successive line. I don't believe this, she muttered to herself at last, folding the letter neatly and tucking it into her bag. She smiled. I don't look for gossip. It looks for me. And this latest piece of news was the most explosive to have found Caroline yet.
So I do want to spend a second on this. I don't look for gossip. Gossip finds me. Like in some ways, I see why she would think that and say that. Like she didn't want to find out, but she didn't want to find this letter. The letter was just there. So I can totally understand why she's like, oh, like anyone would have seen this. But also, like, if you see a letter, it's not addressed to you, you don't read it. Like, that's just...
Well, I think the reason that makes sense to be a thing at this point in the book is because the arc of the book, of her growth, is learning that it's not about her intentions. It's about her behavior, and that she needs to be accountable for her behavior, even if she wasn't looking to do that negative thing. So I think by the end, she learns that.
Yeah.
Then we're at the beach. We got Kara, Jessica, Lila doing their thing. Unfortunately, they see Caroline walking their way.
They're looking over everyone's favorite magazine, Ingenue. And this line just like made me laugh so hard. So they're talking about Regina Morrow and what she is, how she's doing, etc. And Lila goes, I'm not jealous. I'm not the slightest bit jealous of Regina Morrow. I think modeling is vulgar. And I thought that was such a funny line.
It's very funny because, of course, what these girls don't know is Lila went to the guy's office and begged him to let her model. But
also, it's just like a ridiculous, like, what does that even mean? You think modeling is vulgar?
This happens later. She says a lot of things are vulgar. It's a thing of like her just being, it's like just like a thing she likes to say.
I love it. I'm looking for more. I would read Lila's Guide to Vulgarity in a heartbeat.
It's really funny. So you see their perspective of like, oh God, Caroline's coming. And then it says, actually, Caroline, was uncertain about what she was doing. She'd arrived at the beach about 2 hours earlier, hoping to see someone she knew. The beach was packed with people sitting in pairs or threesomes on beach towels. But Caroline hadn't spotted it from Sweet Valley High. She'd always loved the ocean, so she decided to stay anyway. But now she was beginning to get bored. Ready to leave, she put on her clothes, then decided to look around once more for someone she recognized.
So Caroline approaches them at the beach, and her approach is totally nice and normal. She's like, I'm really glad I found you. I stopped by your house earlier, Jessica, but your sister said you were still asleep, so I took the bus. I can't believe how mobbed this place is.
And then she's so desperate to find something that is going to catch their interest because they seem so bored with her. And the way that she knows how to do that, where she's going to try to connect, is through gossip. So she says, I don't suppose any of you heard about Annie Whitman and Ricky Capaldo. And they're yawning. And she keeps trying. Annie was pretty angry with him last night. And then she basically starts some rumor that I don't think we need to say the details of, that has to do with the conflict between Annie and Ricky.
But it's interesting because it's does she try to start a rumor? Is it gossip? Is it just that when we're bored and we don't have anything to talk about with ourselves, we talk about other people? And is that inherently bad? That's what I think I've already gotten so sympathetic to Caroline that I'm is this even gossip? Or is it just a fact that she's sharing?
I don't think it has to be false for it to be gossip. It's the question of what is gossip and is gossip bad? What is okay sort of general social talk about others? What is malicious and what is in between and just harmful and unnecessary? And where does eyes and ears fall, I think, is a good question.
Yeah, that's an unanswered question as of yet.
I mean, I could tell you a couple of things I have here.
Okay. I could listen.
There's been, I guess, a big debate between different approaches to gossip, the sort of structuralist, functionalist approach, and then the more transactionalist stance, which is more focused on the individual. So structural functionalist approaches is approaches that like to talk about things like what makes the society work, and everything has a function. And that's how we should look at behavior, social processes. So that approach says, from Max Gluckman, the function gossip serves in society, the principal role is to maintain unity of social groups by asserting boundaries between acceptable and deviant behavior without having explicit confrontation. You could say that Jessica spreading rumors about what a slut Annie is, we talked a lot about boundary maintenance. And if you think of it from the group perspective, and again, it takes away the question of good or bad. It's just in terms of describing what it's doing. One of the things that you may see gossip doing is creating these boundaries that people may or may not adhere to or may or may not like, but of just what the sort of dominant view is and sort of maintaining that social order. Then we got this guy, Robert Payne, 1967.
No relation, listeners.
Taking the transactionalist stance, which is more focused on how do individuals use gossip in a transactional way.
Okay.
And he says gossip is at first a genre of informal communication, and second, a device to forward and protect individual interests. And the way he defines gossip is talk of personalities and their involvement in events of the community, and talk that draws out other persons to talk in this way. For a gossiper usually endeavors to receive more than they give. They have, quote, long ears, and part of their art lies in arranging a constant flow of information to themselves. Gossip is a powerful social instrument, and any person who learns to manage it can thereby direct or canalize its catalytic effect. But then we have the Encyclopedia of Cultural Anthropology saying the thing that anthropologists love to say, which is, guess what, guys? It's not mutually exclusive. Gossip can have both cohesion building and self-serving purposes or consequences. We have to think about the audience whose cooperation and participation plays a big role. Because I think one question is gossip part of the power or part of the resistance? Is it the big guy or the little guy? And this says, because gossip is particularly difficult to repress or contain, it frequently emerges as an instrument of protest and resistance in the hands of those with restricted access to more overt forms of political actions. But it can also be used by people in power to control. It can also deflect conflict. People sometimes gossip in order to avoid aggressive confrontations. And that's one of the readings that I think is really, really fascinating. Okay, Marjorie Goodwin, who's this amazing, amazing linguistic anthropologist, she has this ethnography of African-American kids in Philly. Mm-hmm. And she talks about how the children tattle on each other. They accuse each other of gossiping. Because their narratives implicate several individuals, they obscure responsibility and easily lead to denials of wrongdoings, thereby avoiding more serious physical confrontations, allowing protagonists to save face and reestablishing compromised friendships. And that's a reading that I really love, which is saying it's actually a way to maintain social order or maintain the norms of whatever group without directly confronting or accusing or shaming the person who violated those rules is a very sort of paradoxically cooperative approach. So I don't know where Caroline falls there, but.
Yeah, it's kind of confusing because for her, it doesn't, I don't think like this example, for example, she's talking about Annie and Ricky and the fact that Annie got mad at Ricky. Later, Annie does kind of say, why did you spread that about me? I wasn't mad. But it raises obviously the question, like, does it matter if it's true or not? And do we care why Caroline is doing it?
That wasn't her intent. She wasn't using it as an instrument to do harm or do those things, but that is still what happened. And so it's like, I think that's the lesson is even if she has benign intent, just the mere fact of talking about stuff, again, regardless of if it's real or false, because it can misconstrue or it can create a misunderstanding or just a broken telephone, or it can create some social fact that may have not existed or got exacerbated or blown out from it, right? And like, for whatever reason, that did end up causing something between Annie and Ricky over the rumor, and they had some conflict over it. I think we later find out. So it did create a real problem for them, just the fact of this information being spread. We have a moment where Jessica is making fun of Caroline on the beach. She's doing an imitation of her like high-pitched voice or whatever after they send her away or something. And then there's the like Caroline Lila giving her the like and her like not understanding and then realizing Caroline's standing right behind her. Oh, and we have some more to talk about Adam and Cold Springs.
When they're talking about Adam and Caroline says, there's something so commanding about him, it was impossible not to fall in love with him. And it just gets back to what we've been talking about over and over again about the ways that like power and attraction and safety and danger are all kind of conflated in these books, and oftentimes for young people figuring out their sexuality and what they like. Icky.
Yeah, I found that kind of gross too. I guess it's also interesting that we see her spreading gossip, like maybe in different use cases or for different jobs to be done. For example, we've seen her do it as a way to kind of get attention in a conversation or be seen as interesting. But we also see her doing it vindictively or to punish, like, because the moment that she tells Jessica about what she found in her trash can is after she sees her making fun of her. Because when Caroline shows up and hears Jessica imitating her, she has sort of a calm demeanor where she says, that's pretty good. Is that what I sound like? And you're kind of like, oh, wow, that's a pretty mature reaction for someone. But then Caroline's saying how she went over to Maria to find out some information about this and that, and she didn't give it to her. Jessica's like, oh, so I guess she wanted you to mind your business. Caroline's face burned. So I think it's also like Jessica has now humiliated her in multiple building ways. She tried to play along with Jess, but she had all she could take. And then her eyes sparkling with anger. You must be awfully busy getting ready to move. 16 years is a long time in one place, and it must be hard to tear yourself away from Sweet Valley.
What are you talking about? I'm not going anywhere.
Are you going to stay behind when your family moves?
Is this some kind of joke?
Not unless this is a joke.
Jessica sat down, unfolded the letter, and read it quickly, her jaw dropping open in disbelief. The letter was from her mother, written to a large design firm in, one word, San Francisco. In the letter, Mrs. Wakefield thanked them for the job offer and said she had to think it over, though the position looked too attractive to turn down. She'd be back in touch soon, but in any case, she wouldn't be able to move her whole family to a new city for at least a month. Now, listener, when I say my jaw dropped the way that Jessica's jaw dropped.
Okay, this is what I wanted to know from you. So when you read the initial, Caroline picks it up from the trash, it's addressed to the design from Alice. What were you thinking?
I was just thinking Alice was getting a big job, or I thought it was maybe something bad that Alice had done that she was interested in, that Caroline was interested in gossiping about. I at no point was I like, oh, they're Frisco bound. It did not cross my mind, even in a second.
So how did you feel? How did you feel when you read it?
I felt, I mean, what I love about this is I feel like it's so effective because I've been having a lot of the same feelings that Caroline has been having. Like, it's so evocatively written that when she comes upon them at the beach and she's feeling lonely, I felt that way. And then when she walks back up and sees Jessica making fun of her, like, I felt my cheeks flushed with embarrassment, just as Caroline's did. But Francine and Kate's brilliance and their gift with words kind of has me boomeranging back and forth or ping-ponging back and forth. And all of a sudden I'm in Jessica's and I'm like, oh my God, her family is moving to San Francisco and they didn't tell me? Like, that was my experience, just as it was Jessica's.
It's truly shocking.
Truly shock.
And I mean, it needs to be said, the way Alice and Ned handle this, especially Ned, is so psychotic that you weren't bothered by this. I found especially the way Ned handled it so insane. So basically, Jessica tells Liz what's going on. And then Liz is like, stay calm, stay calm. And at dinner, Jessica doesn't know the meaning of the word calm. Her parents had barely taken the pizza out of its cardboard box when the first explosion occurred. Jessica storms downstairs. Mom, how could you do this to us? Mrs. Wakefield laughed. I take you're not in the mood for pizza. Who cares about pizza? She demanded. I'm talking about my whole life. And She takes out the letter. Mom, how could you do this to us? Don't Liz and I even get to know when we're about to be completely uprooted? And then we get the sort of explanation. Well, I only just found out there's this company called the Hurley Group, and they're one of the biggest design firms in the state, and they want me to head up one of their departments. It's a very flattering offer. I didn't tell you guys yet because I wanted to think about it and talk about it with your father. And then Jessica's like, but now I suppose your mind is made up. Jessica, Mr. Wakefield said sternly, I don't like your tone.
Whoa.
Don't you think you ought to congratulate your mother? And then they're like, we're happy for you, Mom, but like, how can you uproot us? And they're like, well, we're trying to think about your feelings. And like, we're not sure what's going to happen. And basically the twins are like so upset. And then like, Ned's like, that's enough. Jessica, you're being selfish. Your mom has worked for a long time to have this step in her career, and I'm disappointed in you for not appreciating what an opportunity this is. You both owe your mother a little more consideration. And I'm just like, these are 16-year-old girls in the middle of high school who have just found out that they may move cities in a few weeks, okay? That's a major, major, major shock. And it's completely normal that they're reacting with tears and shouting, and for Ned's focus to be on like, how come you girls aren't congratulating your mother more? They're not adults. Their job is not to congratulate their, that's not what they're going to be focused on. Have some empathy for them.
Yeah, I think I was a little bit like taken in by the fact that Ned is even entertaining, like even talking and thinking about moving. Like I was taken in by like, oh, like look at him being good to his wife. And I was kind of overwhelmed by that. So I didn't focus as much on how inappropriate his reaction is to them. But I do agree that it's also just wild because it's like, it's not like you sat down with them and told them and they're having this reaction. You never told them. So it's like the idea that you expect that their natural reaction is to congratulate their mom when they like, no.
They're not adults. They're not
adults, but it also wasn't presented to them in a way that they could ever have that reaction.
Right, exactly. It wasn't like they were like, guys, we have some great news and you are going to have a lot of questions. And we're going to talk about all of it. And to start, here's like, yeah, then maybe they would have said congratulations. Then we get Jessica and Liz saying to each other, well, we're going to have to put our heads together and come up with a plan. And that got my sort of blood flowing of, it's just so much fun to see them work together,
Yeah.
At the Dairy Burger, Caroline spills the beans to Todd. Like Liz wasn't going to tell Todd about this thing of them maybe moving, but then Caroline spills the beans about it and Liz is annoyed.
So I think this is another weird Liz thing where Liz decides Todd can't know about it now. There must be some way Jessica and I convinced mom and dad to stay, and I don't want to burden Todd with the news before it's final. And it's just such a classic Liz creating a need for a scheme and creating a problem where it absolutely does not exist.
And a need for a secret.
Yeah.
Remember when Patsy Weber came and she was like running around crying, freaking out all the time. And then Enid was like, well, have you actually asked him like how he feels? Like, is he actually interested in Patsy? And Liz was like too scared to even ask him. It's like, she's very scared to have difficult conversations or like conversations where she's like worried about what the outcome could be. And like, there is a possibility that Todd's going to say, well, I don't think I want to do long distance to San Francisco. So if you move, we're going to have to break up. It's like, she just doesn't want to even think about that.
Yeah.
Library. I mean, the thing that basically just happens at the library is that like Caroline finds out from the librarian that someone else has been checking out the Browning books. And two questions I had there. Number one, why didn't Caroline at that point be like, oh, maybe I should like mix it up a bit and try another poet? If like someone else in my school is like also reading the Browning books, how could that not occur to her? And number two, the librarian's like, oh, someone else was taking this out. Like, I forget their name. I think it started with an L and I'm like, as if the fucking librarian doesn't know Liz Wakefield. Liz Wakefield should be at the library a lot. And so that's either not realistic or it means Liz is actually not as much reading as she would like us to think.
Can I offer a third potential reading? Is there some kind of like librarian oath? Like there's a like HIPAA
anonymity?
where she feels uncomfortable sharing Elizabeth's name, even though she knows Elizabeth's name. Everyone in Sweet Valley knows the Wakefields. You expect that this librarian doesn't recognize 5'6", perfect size 6 body, sun-streaked hair, turquoise eyes, one dimple. You think this librarian doesn't know her name? Oh, she knows her name.
If the library has a like confidentiality policy, I think that would be great, but then she should just be straightforward and say that rather than be like, oh, I can't remember. All right. Then we get Caroline writing a letter.
As the first time Caroline had typed a letter to herself from the imaginary Adam, she felt silly. But the letter had been such a big success when she'd read it to her friends at school that she felt better about the next one. Now Caroline couldn't help feeling uneasy about the whole thing. She was getting tired of sneaking around, and it made her feel incredibly sad to type a letter to herself. But she seemed to be getting deeper and deeper into the story she'd invented. And besides, Caroline thought stubbornly, people will think I'm worthless without Adam. I think this does a couple of things. It just like gives us real, clear, direct insight into Caroline and why she's doing this. I also think it kind of gives us a resounding answer to, is Caroline's romance real? The question you were posing. Like, I would say that still no. I feel like this is sadness and not romance to me.
At this point. When you were reading that quote, just the line that comes after, people think I'm worthless about Adam. Anita doesn't know about him, and she's pretty good proof of that. So sad. And so what she's saying, like she actually internally feels that she has no worth in the eyes of others. And that her proof of that is how her own sister treats her. It's just so sad.
It's just also interesting because we actually don't really see proof that Anita sees her as worthless.
I agree that Anita hasn't treated her as if she's worthless, but I also think we do see that like Anita doesn't pay that much attention to her, have that much time for her. She's not usually attentive to her. Like when Caroline's talking, she's not listening.
We get introduced to the most important character in the text, the Pearce's toy poodle, who barks when Anita is home. What's your name, toy poodle? Why weren't you given a name?
Okay, one-sided phone call?
Yeah.
I mean, Caroline basically is like, this is it. This is the big moment. It's all been leading up to this. She's been like rehearsing and practicing of like how she's going to do this one-sided phone call that is going to give the proof to Anita that Adam is real. And so she like waits for Anita's going to be home and she gets that little bark from the toy poodle and she's on the phone being like, Adam, I love you too. And then Anita, who just finished a cup of yogurt, is like, who's Adam? And then she tells her some lie about Cold Springs.
I'm sorry. Are you in a rush? Do you have like a time crunch or something? Because you're skipping over some of your favorite stuff and it's making me think something in the milk ain't clean. Caroline saunters into the kitchen, takes a glass from the cupboard and pours herself some milk. Come on, Pardo. It's scaring me that you're not interested in what used to bring you joy. So then Anita and Caroline talk about Adam. And I do think I've been a little unfair to Caroline because it is clear that Anita is way more interested in Caroline now that they're talking about Adam. One thing that's kind of interesting is the way that we try to prove that Adam is or isn't real. Like Anita immediately goes, would you mind showing me these letters? I'd like to see them for myself. And it just feels like there is this like no one is really buying this at all. And everyone's immediately like, show me some proof. And Caroline always has in her back pocket some kind of token or trinket of proof.
But to like stave them off because she knows it isn't going to last forever. Like at some point, this guy has to materialize. Like, and eventually Lila's going to show up and wiggle a bus ticket in her face and say, you don't have any more excuses because I checked the schedule and his basketball team stopped playing.
I mean, we could probably jump there. That is an amazing moment. I'm not a Lila head, but that was an amazing moment. We get some more text of Adam's letters, and it still just like truly boggles the mind that Caroline believes that anyone in the entire world would believe a high school boy is writing these letters.
I agree. It's like so crazy. And I wonder if at the time it was written, it also sounded as crazy, or if not that any teenager would ever write this way, but that in this type of book, do you think it was supposed to sound as crazy to the characters in this book as it does to us, I guess is what I'm saying. Like, she's not dumb, right? Lila and Jess are hinting at it, like, oh, I guess he seems to really have a flair with language and his soul's going to float on over and he really is laying it on. And like, they're hinting that it's fake, but they're not like, what? Like, I don't know. What do you think?
I think that's like us having to suspend our disbelief, because I think there is no world in which in 1984, I mean, as I read the rest of the text, no one else talks like that. Even our, like, the most gifted genius writer of our generation, Elizabeth Wakefield, doesn't write this way. So I think, I mean, I guess, again, you got back to this. You started us off with that brilliant point about the kind of genre of love letters, and kind of it's always already kind of a performative, normative kind of form. And so maybe this is just like what high school kids might think a love letter is like. Maybe. My dearest, inexpressibly dearest Caroline, your flower is the one flower I have seen or see or shall see. When it fades, I will bless it till it shines again. Caroline, if you meant to make me the most exquisitely happy, and you did surely mean it, well, you've succeeded.
You know what we're going to have to do? We're going to have to get to a book where there's an example of an actual love letter and see what that's like. Because
there's no way it's going to read like this.
Because I'm thinking, what do we have examples of? We have George's letter to Enid, but that was when they were being friends, right? Like, we don't have an actual example of a real love letter yet, do we?
No.
I'm sure we'll get one soon, but that's what we'll have to do. Then we get some fun at the Chamber of Commerce. So Jessica and Liz are giggling their way through the doors of the Sweet Valley Chamber of Commerce, and they get a very serious expression, and they say, yes, ma'am, hello. Can you help us with our civic community project? We want to be on every mailing list. They basically dox their parents at the Chamber of Commerce with Sweet Valley promotional tourist materials. They're basically like, we're doing a project. Here's our address. Send us literally every single thing you can.
Can I share? When my brother and I were growing up, we used to sign our family up for catalogs, mailing lists, any kind of mail-in thing with fake names, but our real address. My favorite one was Aroma del Baño, which means like odor of the bathroom.
I love that.
So this for me was like very nostalgic, because it's like, oh yeah, I think I was younger than, I hope I was younger than them, but I can vividly remember like walking around Williamsburg, Virginia, and like there being stores where you could sign up to get a catalog, and signing up Aroma del Baño and thinking it was like the funniest thing in the world. And I was right. It's really funny.
Very funny. It is very funny.
I'm still laughing.
While they're at the Chamber of Commerce, they learn about a big event, which is the Centennial Celebration. And this is going to come up in later books. There's a big celebration for Sweet Valley. It involves a parade and blah, 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 blah.
A blah, blah, blah. You blah, blah, blah over what I hope actually comes up, which is a beauty contest. I am dying for the Wakefield twins to both enter a beauty contest and compete against each other. Please let me speak that into existence. I'm trying to manifest it.
No comment.
Thank you.
Then we got Caroline's new look. Her sister is making her wear a lower cut t-shirt than she's comfortable with. She also has a new haircut that Anita took her to get. And then we have another faux pas, a well-intentioned faux pas. She says hi to Bill Chase, and she says, I just want to feel more confident. I can make small talk. She asks Bill how's his play, and he's like, how did you know I was writing a play?
You can see that people already treat Caroline like she is always malicious and evil. Like, it is such a strange reaction to say, how did you know I was writing a play? He said, looking closely at Caroline. Like, there's such a suspicion that's always already on her, our poor Caroline dear. Okay,
so this professor called Stanton Wortham, who's a linguistic anthropologist at Penn, who was on my dissertation committee. He has a paper in, I think, the Journal of Linguistic Anthropology or somewhere, called Socialization Beyond the Speech Event. It's about classroom dynamics. He does education anthropology. And he had this one case of a student. Basically, what it's saying is that people are socialized into identities over what they call like speech chains, or like multiple speech events or interaction events that occur over time, right? It doesn't just happen through one interaction. And I think Caroline's a great example of this, but he talks about this ninth grade student, and he analyzed this sort of trajectory of socialization whereby she became gradually socialized as disruptive. And then going along with that, she began to gradually inhabit that role.
I've read this paper.
You did?
I think so. This sounds very, very familiar.
Yeah, it's really good. And so he basically shows how these sort of little micro moments where people are, so for example, she would raise her hand, and the way that the teacher or another student would respond to her was as if it was already disruptive. And they did that so many times that she started becoming actually disruptive. And so I think what you said about how Bill and Elizabeth and others kind of react to Caroline, like, yeah, she's saying these weird things to them, but it does seem like pretty much the instant she shows up, people are already skeptical. And I think it's certainly one of these cases where it's this sort of cumulative social identity that she's built and continues to kind of inhabit until she starts making some changes.
What's interesting and potentially unrealistic about these books is how quickly one can get out of those identities. Whereas I imagine for our 9th grade student in that paper, that identity was harder to kind of uninhabit.
Yeah, well, it depends for which characters, I guess. Like, for example, Robin Wilson, it was a very quick change, right? Her old identity got erased in one book.
Yeah.
Caroline, I don't know if it's going to be the same. Like, in the end, she does start making changes, and people, I think, recognize that. I don't know if she suddenly is included or has a ton of friends or anything like that, but we'll see.
But I'm hoping.
So she's talking to Bill about how he's writing a play, and she's like, is that why you were talking to Mr. Jaworski this morning? Her curiosity was aroused. Jaworski, of course, famously is the drama coach. And then Bill's like, I wasn't talking to Jaworski about that. I was talking about something else. Mind your business. And then Annie comes up to Caroline's like, can you tell me what you've been saying about me and Ricky? You're spreading this story, and I appreciate if you mind your business. Ricky and Maria are friends. I don't care about how they talk to each other. You made it sound like I was jealous, and Ricky and I almost broke up over it. So it's this thing of like, she's amplifying, right? So maybe it's facts, but she exaggerated or she made something out of nothing. And then she says, leave us alone.
Do we care at all about the fact that Bill Chase's play is about Edwin Booth or no?
I don't know who this or what this is. Go ahead.
Edwin Booth is just widely, I mean, as it says here, he's widely considered to be one of the greatest American actors of all time, if not the greatest American actor of all time. His legacy, you may not know him, but you probably know, I think it's his older brother, John Wilkes Booth, who assassinated Abraham Lincoln.
It's giving murder.
It's giving assassination
at the theater. Wait, so was he not stigmatized for being from what Jessica would call a bad family?
I believe he was stigmatized by what Jessica would call.
Like, why is Jessica okay with him? I don't know that she is, but.
We really should find out how Jessica feels about the stigma of John Wilkes Booth.
Okay. Then they're at the Dairy Burger, and Caroline's eyes light up as she sees Liz and Todd. And it's like, again, she like goes over to people and tries to say something with good intentions. And she basically is thinking, like, I think it says somewhere here, basically Caroline thinks to herself, if Bill was talking to Jaworski about his play, that's cheating because he's getting advice from a teacher. If that's happening, Elizabeth deserves to know. It's the least she could do, Caroline told herself, balancing her tray. She came up to the corner table. So Caroline's thinking, like, in this case, her motivation of doing gossip is to, like, she thinks she's trying to be a good friend or, like, make it up to Liz somehow for doing her wrong. Is like, give her this information. And so she does give Liz the information. And Liz and Todd are basically talking about, like, do you think it's true or not? And Todd's like, I think she's a troublemaker. She's making up nonsense. And then Elizabeth holds up her hand and she's like, be quiet. I see something over there that bothers me and that I don't like Todd, and we must turn our attention to it at once. And what is it, Robert, that she freaking sees? And I would like to know how you felt about this development.
I mean, you know how I felt about this. If you're pretending like you need to know how I felt about this, she sees Regina Morrow talking to Bruce Patton. I mean, I'm terrified. You know how I feel. I feel hurt. I feel alone. I feel scared. I'm not happy. So we move to the Wakefield split level home, Spanish tiled kitchen. Alice comes in, and the table has already been set with the Wakefield's good china and silver. Something was cooking, and it smelled delicious.
Yeah, Liz and Jess are laying it on thick and saying, we wanted to do something for you because we weren't congratulatory enough when we heard about your new gig. And they have prepared a beautiful dinner with ingredients and things from all the most wonderful local vendors and merchants. So they have flowers from pedal pushers.
And
they have
listeners, we need to spend a moment there. Petal pushers, PETAL space PUSHERS, is truly one of the best names for a flower shop I can imagine.
It is really good.
It's really good.
The salad dressing is superb because it's been made with the special Dijon mustard from Seasons Gourmet Shop.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the next course is veal parmesan from Vito's, an old favorite of the Wakefields, and they used to get takeout from there almost once a week.
So this is oh, sorry. And then there's the lemon chiffon pie from Casters. What is the budget for this scheme?
Yeah, good question.
So all of this, of course, listeners, is just an attempt to remind their parents of the great, great, great things Sweet Valley has to offer.
Then the craziest thing in the world is that this playwriting competition, the way that Jaworski is going to judge it is that all the students that have entered are reading their plays aloud, which is the craziest thing. Sense. I've never heard of such a thing in my life. There was zero reason that would or should ever happen except to facilitate the plot of this book.
Right.
It's really hard to swallow.
But it's like, it's not that they stage the play. That's what's confusing to me. Because when you write a play, at first I was like, is it a one-woman play? But they actually explicitly later make it clear that it is not a one-woman play.
It's insane. It's insanity. And then Liz is like reading her play for the family, and Jess has a light bulb happen. Boom! I've heard this before. So Jessica figures it out, loses her shit, gets up being like, oh my God, I that was just the most amazing play I ever heard, and runs away to call Lila and tell her. Those letters Caroline's been passing off as her boyfriends are fakes. They were written by a dead poet. And Lila has the interpretation of, well, I guess Adam plagiarized. So Adam's not a poet. He's a plagiarizer.
I'll bet Caroline doesn't even know.
And then Jessica says, well, maybe she knows all too well. I mean, how realistic is it that some fabulous romantic guy is going to fall head over heels with Caroline? When you come down to it, it's practically science fiction. What are you trying to say, Jess? I think Caroline wrote those letters herself. They're always typewritten. If he's so romantic, he would have done it by hand. And why does she have so many letters if he's so busy? Their plan is, as of now, just put pressure on her. Like, you better bring Adam to come see us kind of thing. And they're like, well, why don't we do it at the sorority meeting tomorrow? And I'm like, how did Caroline get into PBA?
Thank you. Thank you for voicing the question on literally every reader's lips. We'll talk to Caroline about it. Caroline, a girl we don't notice, we don't like, we roll our eyes all the time. She doesn't get blackballed? Excuse me?
Yeah. PBA, Lila says she's going to have a party for Adam. And then we got...
oh my God, this made me cackle out loud.
This was the greatest.
Phase one of the plan was signing Aroma del Baño up for all of those mailers to go to the house so they remember how much they love Sweet Valley. Phase two, we already talked about the salad, the lemon chiffon, the Vito's veal piccata of it all. Phase three is an anti-San Francisco campaign that makes me giddy with glee.
It's the carrot and the stick. And first they started with the carrot and they say, look how great Sweet Valley is. You can get the special mustard and you can go to nice places to have nice veal. And they think, well, maybe we need to put pressure on the other end, and now they're working the stick.
And the way they work the stick is that Jessica is apparently doing a project for her history class. We're each supposed to cover a topic in current events. What's your topic? Her father asked, picking up one of the articles. 4 killed in San Francisco quake, the headline ran. A smile broke over Mr. Wakefield's face as he picked up the other articles. Blaze destroys Frisco Hotel. Crime in San Francisco. Can it be stopped? Drugs in the city, the last was titled. I can't help it, Daddy. I'm supposed to cover natural and unnatural disasters. Can I help it if so many happen to take place in San Francisco? Just brilliant.
And then she goes, it's a sad fact. Ken Matthews is covering urban blight. It's amazing how tough life is in big cities. Like San Francisco, I suppose, her mother asked, smiling. There are lots of advantages too, Jessica pointed out. Who cares about little things like smog or drugs or crime when you've got all those theater and restaurants? And then they say, and we're going to treat you two to a night at Tiburtino's. Tiburtino's? It's run by Sal Ciardi, a round-faced Italian who had known the Wakefields all their lives. And Mr. Wakefield used to claim you couldn't find better lasagna than Tiburtino's on this side of Rome.
I mean, I love lasagna, so I'm pretty
Okay, and then we
get
a huge data point, okay?
Oh my gosh.
We have...
when I saw this, I mean, you've primed me to care about this, but I was like, oh my God, Pardo must be screaming.
Let me just explain, okay, listeners? I have stated before that there is an inconsistency in the series where the questionable nature of Ned Wakefield's allergy or just relationship to Chinese food. Sometimes it's described as an allergy, sometimes it's described that he actually eats it and it's fine, and sometimes it's described he just doesn't like it. Now, in this book is when we have, I believe, our first mention of this, and what happens is Jessica says, well, there will be lots of restaurants in San Francisco. There's always Chinatown. Elizabeth had to fight to contain a giggle. Her father was allergic to Chinese food, and Jessica knew it as well as she did. So here we have, he has a known allergy.
I think it's also important to note that it is truly, you cannot be allergic to Chinese food.
Sometimes people that have an allergy to MSG, they'll apply it to Chinese food, that some Chinese food has a lot of MSG. So I've heard it like that. So, but they should clarify, like, what is going on here? Is it an allergy to an ingredient that's commonly found in whatever Chinese food they get? Is it a not allergy, but something hurts his tummy? Like, is it he just, like, what are we talking about here?
Also, I've heard that people like claim to be allergic to MSG, but that like most people who claim to be allergic to MSG are not actually allergic to MSG. They're just racist. So
then we get the next phase of Jessica and Elizabeth's scheme, which is Jessica is out at Las Palmas Canyon, which is about half an hour drive from Wakefield's house, a place that is a very beautiful scenic spot. And she calls Daddy and says, Daddy, the car broke down. Come get me. And then he does. And
the car is totally fine, obviously. And he's just like, oh, that's weird. Maybe you need a new battery.
And then she's like, it's so peaceful here, Daddy. And he's like, I'd almost forgotten. I used to always drive out here when I had a tough case I wanted to think about. And I'm like, that's weird. Like, that's a half-hour drive from your house. Like, you're going.
He's got to stay away from the kids somehow.
Like, truly. It's like, can't you just go sit in a bench in a park or something? I don't know. And then they're being nostalgic, and Jess is like, I remember the first time you took us out here for a picnic. Liz said there were bears, but I didn't believe her. Oh, look, it's deer, Daddy, it's a deer. Oh, look, there's more than one, Daddy, it's a mini deer. And they pranced around the ledge. I bet you don't see too many deer in San Francisco. And then they go home, and on the way home, stopping at a red light across the farmer's market, she's about to change the tape in the cassette machine, and she sees, guess who? Caroline Pearce holding groceries. So I guess she's not in Cold Springs.
I'd recognize that red hair anywhere.
And Jessica is excited to tell Lila about this. And they freaking talk on the phone and they say, God damn it, we're going to pin her down on Monday and make her fucking suffer. She's in for the roughest week of her life.
Lila says, no one's going to make a fool out of us. As if they're the ones who are most implicated in all of this. As if this really has anything to do with them.
Right. Like there's literally no stakes. But that's why I feel like Lila's maybe more doing it like just as to quote unquote, like, again, in their ideology, not mine, sort of like be a friend to Jess or be support. It's like, this is how they be friends to each other. It's like if the other person has a vendetta against someone, their way of being a friend is to like help be mean to them kind of thing.
I think we can't overlook the beginning at the beach when Lila's like, there are no boys in Sweet Valley. There's no one for me to date. I think there is something potentially there.
Oh, just jealousy of having a boy?
Jealousy of having a boy.
Whatever happened to Drake?
Great question. Drake? Of course I remember Drake. He's a musical sensation.
Who goes to my dentist? Never forget.
How as if the idea that anyone could forget that Drake goes to your dentist. Also, do we have to bleep that? Is that a HIPAA thing or is that fine?
No, actually, and the reason she's allowed to talk about it is because he posted it on his Instagram. So he has publicly talked about how she's his dentist. And she said, I never used to tell anyone until that happened.
Okay. That seems reasonable.
So then we get basically Lila and Jess say, like, we are like forcing her into a corner, come hell or high water. She tells them a little story about what she and Adam did in Cold Spring all weekend. Lila says it sounds too good to be true.
They say, let's have a party in his honor. And Caroline's like, I'm not sure. Adam doesn't have much money. And then she pulls out a bus ticket she has already bought.
Imagine going to that effort. She had to go, like, they don't have internet. This isn't a ticket on her phone. She had to go to Lila Fowler probably had to go to the actual bus station to get this.
Or I guess you could send a servant from Fowler Crest potentially, but still, it's an investment.
And then getting John to check the schedules.
Yeah. And he can't check the schedules online. He's calling probably.
Well, no.
No?
You know who John is, right?
He's the sports editor for the...
Yeah, so he probably has the schedules.
That's probably true. Still, it's a lot of work that they put into this scheme.
Crazy.
The next phase of the scheme is It's interesting because there are different phases of different schemes in this text, because there's the San Francisco scheme and the Adam's a fake scheme. The next phase of the Adam's fake scheme is they're like, oh, you should read the letter to Liz, because Liz is an expert about love letters. And Caroline's like, what do you mean? And Jessica gives Lila a sly smile and says, well, you know, she's writing her play about Robert Browning and Elizabeth Barrett Browning, and she'll be reading it at the competition on Friday night. Browning was a real ace at love letters. Don't you think so, Lila? Lila giggled. Not as good as Adam. And so now she knows it's happening.
She knows they know for sure.
She knows they know.
So she has to do this painful thing of reading the letter in front of Liz, knowing Liz is going to recognize it, and they know. Liz recognizes it, but graciously doesn't say anything until Jess and Lila leave. Caroline tells Liz, listen, these letters are not written by him. Liz assumes she means he plagiarized. And then she's like, well, why'd you make it up? And she says, I'm so lonely and I want friends. And Liz is like, well, you shouldn't gossip so much. And like, don't worry about getting attention. You should worry about paying attention to other people. And Caroline asks Liz, can you not read your play for the contest? Because then everyone's going to know. And Liz is like stressed out about it. At the beginning of chapter 11, Jess and Liz are trying to sort of assess, is the plan working or not? And Jess is like, I don't think so. Mom's talking about it and Dad is talking about meeting with a lawyer. And Liz is like, no, but do you hear how they talked about it? Dad didn't seem enthusiastic. And what kind of law firm would want to hire someone who isn't jumping at the chance to be with them? And then Jess says, then why would he bother to go through with the interview? Then Liz says, this is where the big asterisk goes, for Mom's sake. It makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Dad wants to make Mom feel really important. So he goes along with the idea of moving, providing, of course, that he can get a job up there too. But he really doesn't want to move. So he just goes through the motions of looking for a job. Then when nothing materializes, he tells Mom she can't accept her job because he can't find a new one. End of story. Jessica nodded slowly. In its own confusing way, that makes sense, Liz. And then she's like, except for one thing. What if she doesn't want to give it up and she does want to take it? But I'm like, that fucking paragraph of Elizabeth's speculation of what Ned's doing is the most insane thing, because basically what she's saying is, after he's been lecturing the twins about, and this is why I was like, because he's not himself supportive, or at least according to what they think, and they're probably right. So their speculation about Ned is that he's pretending to try to get a job, sort of fake trying to get a law job, to fake support Alice. And what the craziest part about this is that they both are like, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So like, that's actually, in a way, I don't want to say comforting, but like, that's how Jess and Liz sort of resolve, like, oh, that's maybe hopefully what's going on. I'm like, that is so disturbing and fucked up.
Like, the thing that makes them feel good is the idea that their dad is gaslighting and undermining their mom.
Yeah.
Caroline does come clean to Liz, not just that the letters are plagiarized, but that she made up Adam. And there's this moment where Elizabeth asks why, and Caroline's crying, and she says, I don't know. I guess I just wanted to fit in. Every time I heard other girls talk about their boyfriends, I got so jealous I couldn't stand it. I wanted a boyfriend too. I was so desperate, Liz. I used to lie awake nights and think about what this perfect boy would be like. Then one day it just happened. I shared my fantasy boy with the other girls. Things just built up from there, and I came up with the letters. Then things really got out of hand. The fact that she's on the outside looking in and she's like, what is my key to get into this community? How do I get past this locked door? And she realizes that, unfortunately, in Sweet Valley, having a boy is like such a status symbol. And I mean, like, in many ways, this book is kind of, well, parts of this book are like damning critiques of the patriarchy and the idea that women are only valued in terms of their proximity to men.
Well, remember when Annie said, I feel worthless, and Liz is like, you're so beautiful. It's like that thing, like, yeah, worth is beauty and boyfriend.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to tell you, it's very interesting that you just used the phrase on the outside looking in, because that phrase, and this is not a spoiler, is going to come up later in the series as and this is not a spoiler, title, not of a book, but of a song that is written by a character that has massive, massive consequences. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay, that already feels like too much, but you can't get that toothpaste back in the tube, so we must move forward. Caroline asks Liz not to read the play. And I think in Caroline's world, that makes sense. The idea that Liz is like thinking about what to do and whether she's going to do it or not I was just like, this is so weird.
It is weird, except for the fact that the reading of the play as being the only way to submit it is so insane that it actually makes it make sense, which is like, she should be able to just submit it anyway without reading it. Like, here's a paper document. Like that would be the more normal way to do it anyway. So it's kind of like, yeah.
So then Liz and Jessica talk about the fact that Adam doesn't exist. And basically Jess says it. And Liz does not confirm. All she says is, and you still invited him to a party? And Jessica tries to push that blame onto Lila.
Yeah, I mean, basically, Elizabeth's calling Jessica out on her cruelty, which is, if he's fake or not, is not what she's debating. But she's saying, like, well, if you believe him to be fake, you doing his party is like not nice. And then Elizabeth thinks to herself, I better get Todd's help. Todd will know how to help me with this one. It's a tall order, about 6'2". She chuckled, but I have a feeling it may help teach that twin of mine a lesson.
She's just meddling again.
This, I think, is a really interesting one, because the way she meddles here is in a way that, similar to Robin and potentially others, in a way that is going to actually potentially damage or does bad to the person she says she's helping, because what she really wants is to get one on Jessica, which is what she ends up doing is bringing the fake boyfriend to the party. When Caroline's showed up to the party all stoic and about to be like, I'm ready to be honest, I'm ready to tell everyone he's fake. And then she like gets up to whatever, we'll go to it. But she basically gets up to a microphone. It's like, everyone, I have an announcement. And then this tall, handsome boy shows up that Liz and Todd orchestrated to show up for this. It's like, that's not actually helping her. And Liz is giving mixed messages and mixed ethics. Is it okay to lie or not? She just told Caroline like she shouldn't keep up this lie. But then like she's actually getting Caroline to perpetuate the lie for Elizabeth's own selfish desires to see Jessica get her just desserts. Kind of. It's like, that's really, really twisted.
It's truly unreal.
Caroline confesses to Anita. And then they basically have the big conversation. Caroline pours her heart out. I'm so sad and lonely. I want friends. And Anita is like, are you ready for a tough talk? Are you really ready to listen? And she tells her some difficult things to hear, but she basically lectures her about her behavior and how her behavior alienates people. And Caroline really kind of internalizes this. She's like Annie and Ricky, or like telling Elizabeth about Bill Chase and Jaworski. Because Anita says, you have to ask yourself, what you're about to say is going to make people feel better. If it hurts anyone, it's not worth saying.
And again, I don't actually think that is a good rule or a good line for what gossip is and what gossip isn't. Because I think there are certainly things that you can say that may hurt someone that you should still say them. But that's the line that we're working with right now. So fine.
For the purposes of this, I'm fine with it. And then Caroline starts to show a little more bravery. So she then shows up to Elizabeth and says, you know what? I'm sorry that I asked you to not read the play. She says, you shouldn't have to make that kind of sacrifice for me. And I wasn't thinking about you. Go ahead and read it. It's my problem. I really liked that moment. That really was the right thing to do. I was proud of her.
Very mature.
And then she's like, okay, now I'm going to go confess to Jess and Lila. And she's like, all ready to confess to them. And they're like, do you have something to tell us? But then she chickens out and says like, yeah, Adam plagiarized the letters. It turns out they're from this romantic poet, Robert Browning. So, and they're like, but you're still saying he sent them to you? And she's like, yep.
And he's still coming to the party? ? Oh, yes. Caroline blurted out, her courage completely gone. He'll be there.
And Caroline talks to Liz after, and she's like, oh, I just couldn't do it. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I guess I'll figure something out. And then Liz is talking to Todd and being like, you know what? I see Caroline's really trying to change. I'd like to help her. And then she goes, it would just kill Jessica. Again, showing that that's her actual motivation here, because that's so fucked up.
Yeah.
It's so fucked up what she did. Then we have a gorgeous apology again. Caroline taking accountability. I love this. She very simply goes up to Bill and Dee Dee. They are icy to her because she spread the rumor about him cheating from Jaworski. And she just apologizes. It was a dumb thing to do. I'm really sorry. And it turns out he's not in the play competition anymore, but it's because it turns out there's this other opportunity he got from Jaworski. It turns out he has an audition, so everything's fine with him. And she basically says, my days of spreading rumors are over. I'm not trying to do that anymore. And then it says, for the first time, she felt better about the whole mess she'd made. I know I can't expect miraculous changes overnight, but it sure feels good to have made a start. And I just felt so happy. I felt so proud of her.
I do love that. I don't want to circle back into what we've already done, and it's not interesting, but I feel like we're a little hard on Caroline about quote unquote circulating rumors, because what we've seen her do is say things, but only to small groups of people. Like we've seen her say each thing once to one group of people. Like it's not as if we see her going from group to group saying like, oh, did you see that Bill Chase was doing this? Oh, did you see that Bill Chase was doing this? Oh, like she said it to one person. And I feel like she's like, oh, I'm spreading all these rumors. I'm doing all this bad stuff. And it's like, well, it's not like she's typing up everything she thinks and like putting it into a column that everyone in the school reads.
I agree with you that there's a double standard for her and a hypocrisy of like Jessica spreads the same amount of rumors at least and does the same amount of nonsense she does, right? So I agree, like she's not worse in that sense. But according to some of the behaviors that we've seen in this book, like I do believe there are things she should apologize for because they're negative things. Like she's making implications and interpretations that are false, that are damaging people. Like to see Bill just having a conversation with Jaworski and then go tell Elizabeth and imply that he's cheating, like that's not a nice behavior.
I agree. That makes sense to me. I just feel like she's getting punished more than her peers and others. But you're right. Just because they're not getting punished doesn't mean she shouldn't get punished.
I mean, I think we agree. I mean, yeah. I think Elizabeth should be punished for hours and years.
Without question.
All right. Now we got the Wakefields back from Tibertino's. They had their nice lasagna. And
but
then
what's Elizabeth doing at home, Pardo?
She's watching a rerun of The Streets of San Francisco. It's really violent tonight.
It's so... I mean, part of what's funny is just how transparent it is. I guess part of what's funny also is that like I live near 2023 San Francisco. And so the idea of like them talking about how violent 1983 San Francisco is kind of like interesting, but it's just so funny to me.
And I, of course, used to live in the city called San Francisco. The Wakefields say we've decided we're not moving. And then the jig is up about how they decided this a week ago, but they were milking the scheme because they liked all the fancy dinners.
Wait, you're laughing? I think that's insane. I think that is...
I said they're psychotic.
Oh, thank God. I thought you were laughing because like, ha, ha, ha. No, this is unwell.
I just want to say, and I did cut it from whatever episode it was, but there was an episode a while ago where I was like, maybe it was Dear Sister. I was like, do you think the Wakefields are sadists? And they basically spend their time stirring up things to like drive their children insane, go off, pretend they're going to district court, pretend they're going to bridge, and they go to some kind of dungeon, and they just like, their fun in life is torturing their children. Anyways, I ended up cutting from the episode, but this makes me think I should have left it in.
Yeah, I mean, the idea that they're like, oh no, we liked that our 16-year-old daughters are buying us like, y'all are gross and weird.
I mean, let us think about what this really is. Like, they knew their daughters were experiencing like duress and anxiety and angst, and they are teenagers and potential of uprooting their whole life, which is a possible decision that parents can make. But like, why would they let them go on with that duress for an extra week when they knew they could tell them you're not moving? Like, it's so mean.
It's truly terrible. I mean, even if it weren't just about getting the dinner, it's just like, it's so screwed up. Yeah, Elizabeth Williams play contest. I'm sure you clocked the title of her play.
One Woman's Romance.
I mean, this is the story of one woman's romance. This is a story of Caroline's solitary romance. It's very, very weird to call a play that is about the romance between Elizabeth Barrett Browning and Robert Browning One Woman's Romance. It only makes sense if you want to heighten the fact that Caroline is the one involved in one woman's romance.
Caroline's like, congratulations. I thought it would make me feel bad, but actually, this was the most insane line where I was like, she would never, ever, ever say this. A teenager would never say this. It was so insane. When Caroline says to Liz, I had to read it 100 times. I guess I saw how constructive creating a character can be when the circumstances are right. As if that was her fucking thought process. She's made a fake boyfriend by copying these letters. It's about to be revealed. She goes and listens to the play and says, wow, isn't it constructive to create a character under certain circumstances? Create a character. It's a biopic, you know?
I mean, that is truly hilarious. You're absolutely right. She did not create a character or characters. These characters existed.
Okay, then they have a nice hug, and Elizabeth's like, don't worry, everything's going to be fine. And now Elizabeth wants to come to her rescue.
She says this truly insane thing. All I can say is, trust me, Caroline, very often the things you fear most are things that end up turning out all right at the end. Call it a gut feeling or an intuition, but I think everything is going to work out for you.
Elizabeth loves doing that. She did it with Annie. She did it with Robin. When she says the thing of like, trust me, everything's going to be good. And she has a little guilt with herself. She's so annoying.
I know you're so afraid, but sometimes the things you're most afraid of totally work out.
Everyone comes to Fowler Crest for the big party. Elizabeth can't believe her eyes. Anita's done a makeover on Caroline. She looks beautiful in a flattering green satin dress. Her hair brushed back with tortoiseshell combs. Her eyes look nice thanks to some shadow, but her expression, she looks perfectly composed, as if she can handle anything.
Wow, was all
And
Todd could
Todd's like,
say.
there's something nice and different about you.
Is that really you? You're pretty.
Lila hired a mobile disco for the occasion. But then Caroline's like, give me the mic. I have an announcement. And
Which is truly an unbelievable, incredibly strange thing to do.
I mean, it's not like she had gotten the whole school invested in this. Like, although maybe Lila, when she sent the invitations for the party, was like, it's the party to introduce Adam. Like maybe it had been contextualized for the attendees as being about Adam. So she felt like she had to say something because it's like the theme of the party.
She did say that the party is in Adam's honor. So he is the guest of honor. That does come up.
So then based on that, I could think, okay, maybe everyone actually would be asking her. So she does have to actually tell them all. You know what I mean? Versus just like telling Lila and Jess the truth kind of thing.
I guess. I mean, she knows how rumors work. She could tell Lila and Jess the truth and it would spread.
No, but the whole point is like, she's not about that anymore. It's once and for all, hear it from the horse's mouth, period, done, the end.
Yeah.
No more mess. Then it's like, attention, attention.
I know you all came here to meet the boy I've been telling you so much about, but Caroline. A boy's voice cut through her words, and she was struck mute as a tall, friendly-looking boy rushed up and gave her a big hug. Sorry I'm late. I hope you'll forgive me. Caroline felt like shouting, "Who are you?" But the boy quieted the impulse with a kiss. Tell them who I am, he whispered while their lips were still pressed together. She regained her composure quickly. Without even thinking about it, she announced, as I was saying, everybody, here's Adam.
He looks just like the picture.
Jessica says, I don't believe it. She must have pulled him out of a hat.
He's like, my name's actually Jerry. I'm a friend of Todd's. She's like, you're a terrific person to help pull off a dumb stunt like this. Like she says thank you to Elizabeth. Jerry and her have a nice time chatting and dancing. Jerry is playing the role very well and is being nice to her. He declines to dance with Lila. And he says, I'm here to spend the evening with you. But despite herself, Caroline began to feel uneasy. She was having a wonderful time with Jerry, but she couldn't forget it was all a game. He was only playing a role just like the one she was playing by pretending to everyone that he was someone else. As the hours passed, she felt less and less smug about having pulled a fast one on everyone. There was no satisfaction in it. Finally, she couldn't take it any longer. Realizing her conscience wouldn't rest, she asked Lila again to turn down the music. This time she felt calmer, steeled by confidence that she's doing the right thing. I've got another announcement to make, she told the group. I'll keep it simple. I wanted to be like all of you. I wanted to have a boyfriend, to feel as if I belonged. When I couldn't get one on my own, I made one up. There is no Adam. This nice guy is playing a role. He wanted to help out so I wouldn't look like a fool, but I feel foolish anyway. I just want to let you know. She runs off crying. Jerry comes to comfort her and says he's really proud of her. It takes a lot of guts to do that. She says everyone must think I'm a fool. And he's like, maybe some people do, but when I looked at their faces, I mostly saw respect. It's a big person to admit they've done wrong. Yeah, and they have this really kind of genuine interaction where she's like, thanks for your kindness. And he's like, I actually am having a lot of fun with you. I like you. And he says, I'm getting ready to leave, but I'd like to get to know you better. Would you mind if I wrote to you? And she says, I'd love that. And I promise I'll never read your letters to anyone. And then they have a really, really sweet kiss.
I love this. This is exactly what I thought. I mean, this is exactly what we knew would happen.
All right, then we basically get the cliffhanger. Elizabeth and Todd are having a nice little conversation, but she's looking at Bruce and Regina saying, I don't like the looks of that. Bruce is holding Regina in his arms.
I thought you were all in favor of love, Todd said. Love, yes, but not what Bruce is up to. I don't think he knows what love means. All he knows is what makes him feel good. Regina doesn't seem to be complaining. She thinks he really cares for her, and she's completely fallen for him. I just wish there were some way I could protect her from him. Todd smiled. He knew his beard too well and realized that she wouldn't give up until she got through to Regina. If anyone can come to the rescue, I have a feeling it's you, he said lightly, drawing her back into his arms. I wish I could think so, but I have a feeling Regina Morrow may be in for big trouble. Will loving Bruce bring Regina happiness or heartache? Find out in Sweet Valley High number 18, head over heels.
Thoughts, feelings, predictions, concerns?
I mean, I've had a big part of Regina's storyline spoiled for me, so
No, you haven't.
I don't feel comfortable making any kind of...
Do you have any predictions just about Regina and Bruce?
I think wow. Spoiler alert. Wow.
Yeah, listeners, we're about to spoil, so if you don't want to hear spoilers, you should stop this episode now.
My prediction is that he gets her involved in bad stuff and she does cocaine and dies.
Wow.
I hope that's not what happens. I hope she does cocaine and dies later in the series. But since I know she does cocaine and dies, I'm very scared.
Thanks for listening to Sweet Valley Hive, hosted by Robert Marks and Rebecca Pardo. For more, check out our Instagram at Sweet Valley Hive. Theme song by Yessie and artwork by Elliot Carroll.